cool is the transfer window is officially over, and Barca have made a couple of good signings, one of which was the marquee signing of Dani Olmo. For 60 million euros, Barca have got a player that has already shown his traits in the first couple of games. Now we're here to discuss what kind of player Olmo is and what can he bring to Barcelona in the upcoming season.
Most of you have already seen him perform in the last couple of games, and there's a lot of excitement among our Barcelona fans about what he can bring to the table in the season, and everybody's having a lot of high expectations and hopes on the back of 4 wins.
Now, most of us have already seen Olmo in action, as Dev has alluded to, because this is being recorded after the Real Madrid game, and we're all very happy with Dani Olmo's performances so far. And he has already shown us a glimpse of what we can expect from the player moving on into the season. Now, the first thing that I would like to mention about Dani Olmo, and I'll write it down here, as one of his main strengths is the role versatility. Coming into this team, we saw many speculations of where could Dani Olmo actually play. The big thing about Dani Olmo is that he can actually play across the front line and even deeper than that. So he can be a left winger. Of course, we know that he can be a false nine as well. He can be a number 10, and also he can be a right winger. Because interestingly enough, during his Leipzig years, which we will see in the data especially, he was used as the right winger for the team. Dani Olmo is not a player who influences a lot of the pitch at the same time, meaning that he's not someone who will be here and then spend a lot of time here and here. He is more of a small space dominator, and I will talk about this a bit later on. But what this means is that he has smaller zones of influence in any given time. However, he can be effective across the pitch. Now, if he's a left winger, he profiles as a creative technical playmaker, and his zone of influence would be mainly this. Dani Olmo would be a left winger on paper. He would start wide, but then he would move across the left half space. From there, he likes to influence the box and a bit of the central channel. So if he's a left winger, this is the zone of influence that we're looking at. It's the wide area for sure when he starts his movement, but then he moves inside into these pockets and inside channels. And next to his number 10, behind the number 9, and then inside the area as well. Now, this is Dani Olmo, the left winger, as a creative technical playmaker. Moving forward is a false 9, and this is a very self-explanatory role. It focuses on the central channels, but Olmo is a player that likes to be involved there. He's not a volume passer or a volume progressor, as we'll see further on, but he's someone who likes to be involved. So that means the false 9 role would suit him in a sense that he can move inside the area. He can be very effective in this area. However, he also wants to be the build-up 9. He wants to be someone who comes closer to number 10 and then play make from this area, receive the passes from deep, maybe even play a 1-2 and then burst back into the space, into the area. So as a 9, he would be someone who's very link-up heavy, someone who likes to be deeper, someone who's not chained to this box inside the penalty area. So that's the kind of 9 that we're looking at when we talk about Dani Olmo. Now, as a right winger, things are a bit more limited. When he was at Leipzig, he was a right winger, and yes, he did get the license to move inside. So start wide, but move inside and move into the right half space. And from this area, of course, he can still play, he can still shoot at goal and do what he does. However, being a right-footed player by nature, this sort of limits what he can do and naturally pushes Olmo a bit wider than you would necessarily want him to be. Maybe he can even go into this area from the right side, but I would stress this is not where you would get the most out of Olmo, just because the angles are much different and the angles are much more limited for a right-footed player. We have the number 10 role, which is what we saw in the first opening 2 games for Olmo at Barcelona under Flick. Now, this means that Olmo is a player who gets the freedom to move left and right. He can move around this area, be a left-sided player, be a right-sided player if he needs to be, but he can also drop deep and influence the build-up, which is the second thing I want to mention about him. He has a very box-to-box nature, and he has a build-up presence. So I'll just put down box-to-box, and I will put down build-up presence. What Olmo does is he influences the deeper areas. He's not a volume passer or a volume progressor, meaning he won't be in this area for long, and he won't be the player that gets to touch the ball 100 times per game. Instead, what he will do, he will drop deep, yes, but then likely what happens is he receives the ball, he does a little pass, a little one-touch layup or something, and then he bursts back into space, right? So he will be in the deeper areas, but only shortly to do a little move that he does, and then he will go back into his more advanced zones where we know that he's much more. However, when it comes to the build-up presence, there are things that Olmo does really well. The first thing I want to mention is the dribble and progression. So if Olmo drops deeper, and we saw this against Real Madrid as well, where they were pressing quite high, almost dropped deeper to assist the build-up. He had a man right on top of him, right? He can dribble passes markers. He can create that separation from the marker, and then once he's free, he can link up with the players next to him and play make. He can actually be the press resistance body in the deeper areas, and he can be that someone who creates a bit of space against the pressure of the opposition. His dribbling is very effective in deep areas as well, but it's also obviously a very attacking tool if he wants it to be an attacking tool. So that's number one. Number two is the deep progression. If he does drop deep and there's no need for him to dribble immediately out of pressure, he can be the deeper distributor because he has a variety of different passes in his locker. He can be the player that connects these thirds from a much deeper area. This is fairly straightforward, but that's what Olmo can do, and he can give you that through his technicality and pass variety. That's number two. Number three in the build-up would be one-touch layups. Right? Olmo can receive the ball when he's tightly marked, be a target when he's tightly marked, and still do his layoffs efficiently. So if he does receive the ball, let's say from this right back over here, the ball goes over the top, Olmo receives it. What he can do, and what we saw him do countless time for Spain and Leipzig, even Barcelona, he can do a one-touch layoff that seems very complex. So even though he's tightly marked, from here, Olmo can do a one-touch layoff and transfer the ball to the free player on the sidelines, for example. So that's one of the things that he can do very effectively. And finally, number four is just pocket play. This ties into the small space domination that we talked about. Olmo can be a reliable target, even if he's tightly marked in these pockets right here. So if you would pass the ball to him, he would still be a safe option, even though he has one or two players right on top of him. That makes him a very interesting build-up presence because he's a player that has the quality on the pass and on the carry and the dribble, and all of that can be a very good build-up presence, but also a very good attacking presence.
He is really versatile, can play across the front line. But I would also say he's very good for minimum weight. Even though he can be a winger, as you rightly pointed out, he drifts in a lot. So by the time he's actually making his forward progression runs or laying the ball into the penalty box or dropping across, it's in that zone of 14 or just in front of that box area. So he likes working in that zone, and depending on how you look into it, and we'll come into the data, when he's progressing the ball or when he's feeding balls into the penalty box, he's much more effective from left-hand side of the pitch, while when crosses and round crosses or cutbacks that he's doing, he's much more effective from the right side of the pitch. So he has a fairly defined versatility to his game, can play across various parts of the pitch, which makes it difficult for low blocks to contain him. He has the ability to find pockets of space. The number of shots that he takes from within the penalty box and outside is about 50% of each. It's hard to pigeonhole him. He's going to mix it up. For a person who can play across the front line, it's very hard to from which direction he's going to come, because he will get involved in the game based on how he's getting involved and who he's getting involved with. The interplay will be such that he can be a threat from the left, he can be a threat from the center, he will be a threat from the right. But overall, super effective in that middle zone, in that minimum narrow width of play. If I look at the team and what the team needs, I think what Dani Olmo brings us is more needed for Flick's style of playing. And I think that the fact that they prioritized him before Nico Williams in terms of money payment and what have you, this was the reason.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because so far what we have seen is Flick is very adamant on controlling this area, right? This middle third of the pitch and middle central channels, he wants to dominate this area, and Olmo gives you that, alongside Pedri, of course, and alongside Raphinha and Lamine. You have this central domination part, and he's a technical playmaker, meaning that he can be very effective in these small pockets where he's tightly marked, where the low blocks are very congested. He's very effective between those lines and those small pockets. And from there, he's a technical playmaker as well, because he can give you a variety of different passes from a variety of different angles. So there's a multitude of different passes that he can do from these central areas in zone 14. Right. Last season, he was very effective in terms of data, particularly in smart passes, through balls, and deep completions, all of which are very important when you face low blocks, congested areas, and these pockets that are normally very difficult to navigate. And Olmo does that brilliant. Now, the final thing when it comes to his attacking output is box presence and just shooting. He is someone who will offer shots from outside the area, inside the area. He does all of that. But one thing he does really is when he is in the box and he's tightly marked again, he creates separation really well. And he has that feel for the movement inside the area in particular. So if you are someone who's very creative, Lamine or maybe Raphinha even, and you're sending these passes inside the box, Olmo will know how to position himself to be in the best possible area to receive the pass and then release a shot as well. The way that he creates that separation, the way that he moves inside the area is very instinctive. He brings that part of the attacking dynamic that Barca have lacked in the past, that instinctive finishing that Lamine or maybe Lewandowski has, but no one else really. And now you have Olmo inside the area who can really, in a sense, he can smell goals. Not right. He knows where he has to be in the best possible position to actually threaten the box. This brings me to one of the negatives, which is his shooting temperament. I talked about this a lot, Dev, and you alluded to it when you said that he takes almost the same number of shots outside the area as inside the area. This is a problem, but it's also a good thing because it gives you the long shot and he will score an occasional long shot, which is very crucial to unlocking these low blocks as well. When you take a lot of long shots, it means you're taking shots from statistically suboptimal positions, right? Because number one, you're far away from the goal. That's number one thing that already goes against you. But number two, you generally have more bodies in front of you. So that means that it's more difficult to squeeze the ball through the defensive block, meaning that your XG, your expected goals value, will be naturally very low, much lower than inside the area. Olmo does tend to shoot from this area a lot. If he can temper his shots more carefully and think maybe if I take the shot from a more optimal position, it will have a higher chance of ending up in a goal. I think his goals will skyrocket for Barcelona. We have already seen hints of this in the first couple of games because he was taking a lot of shots inside the area. He was moving around the edge, trying to take shots from closer range. He already has 2 goals after 2 games. I think if he can keep this up, this is a very good thing to have. And I think it will make him a much more reliable goal scorer, which, to be honest with you, he has not been in his career just yet. So that's one thing that I would say is a weakness at the moment, but it can definitely be improved upon. Now, the second thing, it would be the pressing or off the ball, because statistically, Olmo is a player who gets dribbled past a lot, and he won't really run as much as you would expect from a flick number 10. Now, this might change, and he has been quite good in the first couple of games, but this is what happens when a new player comes into the team and they get this boost and they want to show their best side. Of course, they work really hard. Now, is he going to do that over the course of a full season? Remains to be seen. If he can do that, then yes, I think this won't be an issue because he has the necessary fundamentals to do it. He is decently athletic. He's not really a long distance kind of player. He can be a counter pressing player, which Flick will value a lot. But that also ties into the injuries. If he can stay fit, he solves a lot of issues that Barca have. And this is done before. We have seen this in the first couple of games, and long may it continue.
Hopefully, he stays fit, especially this season for Barca when we have such a thin squad. I just took the stats from his live season last year because I thought that was the most relevant one. If he started shots, got accuracy of about 40%. However, on an XG of 7.63, he closed 15 goals, which means he literally double outperformed his XG, which means he scores more goals than he creates opportunities for. At 26%, that's a seriously good number when it comes to converting from inside the box. And we saw that in the last 2 games, which is again very critical for Barca in facing all the low blocks that they're going to face in the season, because you need a person there to have that 0.7% chance and convert from that. Olmo is that guy. XG, again, not so much to pick up upon, but the fact that a constant opportunity creator within the box. So it's 2.26 shots per 90 inside the box. So if you've got somebody who's basically creating 3 chances a game, right, in very tight spaces inside the box, just one player, that's a lot to take advantage of, especially in tight games where you're struggling to get one goal across or everything's locked in, like the 9-member defense just hemming you in. I think that's what we can take in from this. I think with Lamine, with Pedri, with Fermin, with Leva, those numbers will be starkly different when we look at it next year. If he stays fit and can play all the games. This is an interesting one. His efficacy is about quarter. For every shot assist that he takes, 25% of time, there is going to be a goal. And that's pretty interesting to see when you think about the link up play. So when you think about the way Flick wants to play and the number of players, he's literally using 5 forwards when he's going up and the where wingers are tucking in. When you think about that and what we have seen in the first few games, just the way that the players are trying to link up with each other, short passes, laying off, making space, releasing the runner. What do you feel about this, Dom?
I like this particular graph because it shows you the central proficiency, right? Because, okay, yes, some of these passes have come from the wide areas, but largely you're talking about this very congested central area, right? The zone 14 and even deeper than that. And that's what Flick wants. We saw that Flick wants that central domination and Olmo gives you that. And his creative passing from that area is outstanding, right? He can thread balls from all sorts of different angles and he'll give you a variety of different pass types. And that's amazing when you have players like Lamine and Lewandowski and Raphinha around him. Yes, they can help set him up, but he can also return the favor. He can help set them up, right? And he's very proficient at that. I would even say that last season he was more of a creator than a goal scorer, and he was necessarily a lead goal scorer. He has tools for both of those things. I think at this Barca, we'll see this goal scoring side of him a bit more. That's my hope. That's what I'm thinking he can actually achieve at Barcelona under Flick. But this chance creation and the tools he has for chance creation are outstanding. And that's definitely one of the biggest strengths that Olmo gives you because he's a profile that can fit a more systematic style of play where you have more possession value, but he also fits the more vertical side of things where you want to be playing quickly and directly. So he has the tools to give you both. If you are more of a possession side that faces slow blocks, he gives you the pocket play, he gives you the small space domination. But if you are someone who wants to play more directly, he's someone who can be the deep distributor, who can be a small space carrier. He can be someone who can dominate small to medium areas, and that gives you more oomph in the more direct attacking sense.
Absolutely. The only data that I would like to pick up here is the number of line breaking passes that he makes is about 1.38 per 90. And that's mostly within that box. So you can find that little slither of space within that box and slip that ball in and release a runner. Now look at this graph. Look at his zone of influence. He's playing right across the spectrum. And if you think about what we saw yesterday and the game before, this is exactly the area where Barca is creating the maximum amount of chaos, right? So I think that fits in very well with Flick's philosophy in terms of how you look into it. There was a reason, and there was probably a lot of thinking that went through when the club decided that based on how Flick wanted to play, this was much more important than having another wide winger coming in, which is compensating with what he has right now. But I think that was critical in the way the team thought about how to set up the squad with the limited funds that we have. Look at the crosses that's coming through. And the dark lines are the ground crosses. It's not just, he's also interested into cutbacks or ground passes to just release runners. And where is he releasing the runner? From the edge of the box. There's 11 from the left hand side, 19 from the right hand side. The expected assists from the cross is about 1.14.
This is we talked about is the variety what he does, right? When it comes to his playmaking and creativity, he has a very wide arsenal in his locker. So, and that's what we're likely going to see if this continues. We have seen glimpses of it in the first couple of games. He was more of a goal scoring threat so far under Flick, but he has the creativity and versatility to boot. So I think this is a player that can definitely be useful when it comes to creating chances for the players that he has around him.
Dribbles. Again, I've just taken the final third. In the final third, he's doing almost 5 dribbles per 90. And his success rate is not bad. That's about 75% in the box, in the zone, which is the most patrolled, most defended area in the football pitch. And against center backs, his success rate is about 85.3. And the XG created from these dribbles, it's about 3.31. Again,
Mm.
so important for these low blocks or to create opportunities, which Barca has suffered from, and we know it historically for the last few years. Yes, when Messi was there, he could create things out of his own self. But once you lose a person like that, how do you recreate that level of creativity, which we have struggled with
Mm.
last year and so on. So I'm very keen to see. But if you look at these numbers, these are phenomenal numbers by any stretch of imagination,
Mm.
especially in that box. You talked about counterattack, and yes, he is very much involved in the counterattack as well throughout the pitch, and you can see this. So his XG chain on counters is about 0.18 per 90, which is a fairly high number when it comes to counterattacks. And 23% of that comes from counterattack, which means very effective for the style of play that Flick has, where his point of view is very simple: take possession higher up the pitch as much as possible, and then immediately attack, find the space, release the runner, attack. That's what Flick wants to do. So he's very active in counterattacks. And then this is another one, and I'll pass it along for your thoughts because we are talking about progression here. Long range, 96% efficacy at a 40-meter higher pass. And if you look into it, his progressive passes per 90 is about 6.0. That's large. That's pretty high. Tom, you talked about it, that he does the progression bit quite well. And the data backs it up. These are deep carries that he's doing. So the box to box that Dom talked about, you can see, even though predominantly it's on this part of the pitch, fully he's an attacker. But if you look into the progressive passes, the runs that he's making, the success rate that he has, and as long as everything tells you that here is somebody who is that versatility. Like, he can be a goal scorer, he can be a nine, he can also be a playmaker, and he can also be a winger. And
He's not a volume progressor. He won't stay in deep areas for long and then be the primary progressor, but he can pick up the ball deep, do a dribble in the deep areas, resist the pressure, and then progress the ball either through passing or carrying. He can pass, he can run, and he can be a deeper presence and then immediately after transition into a more higher, near the edge of the penalty area and inside penalty area kind of presence as well.
I wanted to touch on the pressing instinct that you talked about, because you touched upon how he presses, and this is what shows his press in the final third, which is also one of Flick's philosophies, that recover possession high up the pitch as much as possible so that you're constantly pressurizing the opponent and so on. So if you look into it, 0.64 are dangerous, which means it results in a goal. And their rate is almost one in a game because of this pressing. That's insane. And consistent across 38 games in a season, right? So fundamentally underrated. We don't talk about that much, but when you look at the data, this is quite an interesting thing to look into. And then again, Dom talked about zone 14, and you can look into how many recoveries that 60% almost of his recoveries come in that zone 14. He loves playing in that zone, loves staying in that zone, loves to influence that zone, and so on, right? So yeah, these would be the key ones that I wanted to highlight and augment what you were already talking about in the tactical analysis. We've got a great player who, hopefully, if he remains well and not injured, can provide a lot for the way this Barca wants to play. I do not know how successful he would have been in a different kind of setup, but with Flick, I think he'll fit right in terms of the amount of influence that he can have on the game. Any final thoughts from you, Dom, before we wrap this episode up?
I'll just echo what you have said. He just has to remain fit, and then that's the biggest issue out of the way, right? If he doesn't sustain any injuries throughout the season, he can be a constant feature in this Barca, in this Flicks Barca, and I feel like he does fit that idea. He fits the role that Barca needs. The kind of player that influences the right areas of the pitch. He gels well with the rest of the team because he does have the La Masia background as well. Almost has the little edge ahead of those players because he knows what it's like to play for Barcelona. He knows what it's like to play for Spain. That goes in favor of him as well. All the best to him. And I feel like we got a good player. Absolutely. That was never an issue of quality. It was just the issue of should we spend that much money on a single player that might not necessarily plug the biggest holes in this team. But if you continue this run of form and be this influential in the rest of the season, I think we'll have a great player.
I agree with you. And I was a bit sad when the club had to sell Gundogan for his registration. Let's be honest, that's basically what it was. But if you look into it, Gundogan was one of our best players last season, but he does not have exactly these characteristics that Olmo has, which might be much more important for a team which honestly does not have the money or the luxury to have all kinds of players. So when you have to optimize the one, because you can only have one, I think the club did what they thought was the right thing to do in going after the profile that can make the whole team much more competitive. And that's what, the transfer was. So that was it from us, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Check out the one that we have done on Mark Penal, and we'll also bring in Mark Casado and all the youngsters who are coming out of La Masia. It's a very exciting time for La Masia and the B team because so many players are breaking out. We'll have a lot of interesting work that comes out, and we'll bring that in front of you. Hope you join, watch that, share it with your friends. Give us feedback on how to improve because, yeah, we're not perfect and we know that because sometimes we get it wrong. So please share that feedback with us. Until then, stay safe. 15 days of international break. We'll see you next week. And until then, Visca El Barça.